I was stationed out at Lake Mead National Recreation Area. I was in the desert. Thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I wanted to leave. And that's when it happened. I noticed the change in me and how nature kind of transformed my life.
I think my first real connection with nature as a kid was with a willow tree that we had in our front yard. It had long branches that blew in the wind. I spent hours climbing up into the different branches of that.
When I saw the sequoias and the redwoods for the first time.
And I was on a ship with other students from around the world, watching icebergs float by.
I was a canoe guide in the south of France, paddling down these big limestone gorges.
When I first saw Yosemite, just being around these trees that have been there for so long.
The first time that I went out in a triple kayak with someone who was a paraplegic.
It was the first time that I can feel a tree, that I can touch a tree.
I remember for us going on a snow trip, touching it, playing in it, rolling in it, feeling it.
I still remember the excitement in his face when we saw her, the first deer that I've ever seen. I felt like he was a kid because I had never seen my dad that way.
My mom is one of those people who stopped on the side of the road and said, "Look at the wildflowers."
Going horseback riding with my grandfather.
My father was a professor of entomology, people who study insects. And while he was teaching, I was wandering off and looking at things.
When I was a toddler during World War II, my great-grandfather would be out in the back. He had about a 2-acre garden, a victory garden.
My dad put me on his lap. He was grafting trees, citrus trees, and he said, "You want to learn?" I said, "Yeah."
In front of my grandfather's house, there was a guava tree. And that guava tree was like amazing for me.
There was a red fox den near our home, and I would go up in the evenings and watch.
When I was really young, I would go with my setsune, which is Chippewan for grandma, and we would go cranberry picking, and she'd put me in the wheelbarrow, and she would pass them up to me in handfuls, and I'd just sit in the wheelbarrow and eat cranberries.
Growing up in the Great Lakes, I vividly remember a sign down the beach with skull and crossbones, and it said, "This lake is closed," because it was polluted.
Every summer for 12 years, I went camping with my family. Think about it, 1968 when we started, that was the height of the Civil Rights Movement, and we integrated a lot of campgrounds, and I remember that.
In the time when I was growing up in Peru, it was very difficult times. There was a lot of internal warfare and civil guerrilla groups. But we had a house that neighboring was just rolling desert hills. And so my afternoons were spent just exploring, many times on my own.
I was born in the city of Nuremberg, and my parents and my sister and I, we used to do a lot of hiking. We went to the Bavarian Bohemian forest.
I grew up in India, and in school we used to organize a lot of camping trips into the Himalayas. These gorgeous mountains which spread for miles and miles, and you have to see them to believe them.
My parents used to take us as kids, along with the dog, to Point Pelee National Park. You know, there are actually cacti in that park. It was amazing to know that in Canada there are cacti.
When I was 5 years old, I vividly remember my father every Saturday taking myself and my 3-year-old brother to the Adirondacks. I remember the trees and the smells and standing in a river and just feeling enveloped by this water flowing downhill.
2 summers ago, I traveled with my family to the Grand Canyon. It was so overwhelming that I almost had to learn to breathe again.
My grandfather and uncle invited me to go on vacation with them and their family to a lake in Maine. I fell in love with frogs, and each day I was out catching frogs and sneaking them into my grandfather's suitcase. Okay, so that when I went home back to Queens, I'd have my frogs with me.